Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. As the Oasis reunion tour continues its jaunt in stadiums around the world, our last episode started our commemoration of this huge event by starting a new miniseries that traces the timeline of 1990s Britpop, the musical and cultural movement in the UK that gave birth to Oasis. Our previous episode, which started this series, covered the years 1992 to 93, when the demise of Manchester-influenced indie dance rock and dreamy, fuzzy, psychedelic shoegazer rock left a void in the British rock scene that quickly started to be filled by a new crop of bands like Blur, Pulp, Suede, and Elastica, who provided a breath of fresh air with tuneful, tightly crafted, insanely catchy pop rock with a weird artsy edge. In addition, artists that weren't quite Britpop but were Britpop-adjacent in how they were still part of a uniquely British rock revival started to emerge in the form of Radiohead, PJ Harvey, and The Verve. Perhaps more crucially, this new musical movement was driven by a younger generation of musicians and music fans coming of age who were sick and tired of American cultural imperialism dominating every aspect of pop culture. Here was music that specifically spoke to them and their lives. This all leads us to this episode, where we cover the crucial year of 1994 in Britpop's development. This is the year Britpop exploded into the British musical mainstream, not to mention into endless coverage by British music media, with seminal and commercially successful singles by Supergrass, Elastica, Pulp, and the Stone Roses, with the latter trying to latch on to relevance in a musical climate that they helped to set the stage for. But make no mistake, what drove the Britpop movement into prominence in 1994 was the momentous release of two albums by a creatively reborn Blur and a force of nature from Manchester called Oasis. These two albums, Parklife and Definitely Maybe, respectively, were not just hailed as all-time great instant classics by the critical cognoscenti and fans alike. They not just sold millions of records on a level that was unheard of for young groups at the time or any time since the 1960s. They completely altered the landscape of not just British rock, not just British pop music, but of British youth culture, and therefore pop culture, in a way not seen since the punk movement of the 1970s. These were new musical heroes for a new era that badly needed them, and they would steer the direction of British rock for the rest of the decade. So join us as we pour a pint of warm, bitter ale for ourselves and pretend we're at our local pub as we celebrate this magical year of Britpop as well as British rock music in general. And welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
Well, let's get right to it, Arturo. Parallel universe time, baby. Yeah, let's cross over into that the other side of that space-time continuum and go where rock and roll dominates and rock and roll is the thing, man. Where, you know, the lighters are lit and everybody bops their head, bangs their heads, and heavy metal is just awesome, and hip-hop is still, like, real hip-hop is still alive, and everything is right with the world. We all wear jean jackets with patches on them. We all have long hair. Yeah, we all smoke copious amounts of weed, and all is well. I mean, I know. We still, a lot of people still smoke copious amounts of weed on this side, but the music sucks. So it's not quite as fun. So anyway, that's a long way and a kind of a fancy way of saying, folks, that this is the segment of our here show where we cover new and newish artists that we think that you would dig and that we definitely think that you should check out, and or artists of some renown, at least cult renown, that in a more fair world would be huge. So on that note, Arturo, who are you covering in this edition of the Parallel Universe?
Yes, hailing from Columbus, Ohio, the alternative rock trio Golomb, spelled Golomb, just released their second album, The Beat Goes On, and it's a doozy of a record that manages to be excitingly fresh while also endearingly referential and reverential at the same time. Musically, imagine pre-Loveless My Bloody Valentine. That is the heavier, more rocking side of shoegazer rather than the dreamy, ethereal side, mixed with the more tuneful side of Sonic Youth and a heavy dose of the druggy stoner indie rock of the Brian Jonestown Massacre, especially on the tension-filled, crunching rocker Dog. Elsewhere, you have some delectable Easter egg songs that point to some of the band's other influences. Play Music has the mix of hypnotic drive and hooky guitar pop that characterizes the best of Galaxy 500, while Be Here Now is a beautifully loopy elliptical track that evokes Built to Spill, even down to approximating Doug March's vocal delivery and phrasing, all while referencing Oasis in the song title. Lyrically, the album is one big heartfelt love letter to the spiritually healing and redemptive powers of rock and roll. All throughout, singer-guitarist Mickey Schumann's lyrics are endearing in their wide-eyed and sincere affection. In Dog, he tells us, "I want to listen to Let It Bleed. I want you to give me shelter," shamelessly conveying his love for the Rolling Stones.
Yep.
In Real Power, he's practically offering his soul to the altar of rock and roll, confessing his desire for the real power of the music he loves to take his mind away from the drudgery of construction work. In the album's title track, he goes all meta by winkingly and self-deprecatingly referring to the simplicity of his songwriting while also pledging his love for rock and roll and the endless beat. The lyrical message of rock and roll as religion continues in the country rocker Sweet Release, in parentheses, Ain't No Devil, where Schumann, as you can guess from the title, rejects the notion of the devil in his quote-unquote religion, referring to the purity of the music he loves. It's sweet yet powerful. It is a sweet yet powerful rock record that's refreshingly free of irony and long on authentic passion. They wear their influences on their sleeves, but when they wear them so well and do it so well with songs this well crafted and richly textured, it doesn't matter. A very good 4 out of 5 stars, easily in my top 10 of the year. Chris?
Yeah, I like this record a lot, and you're right. It's a very sweet record, and I've seen reviews out there that make comparisons not only to Built to Spill, because, in terms of the sweetness and the innocence of it, it kind of recalls There's Nothing Wrong with Love in some ways. But I've also seen comparisons to Guided by Voices. And
I don't really hear them in it. I don't hear them.
Yeah, but some of the tunefulness. I mean, I guess you could say anybody that carries a great tune might be influenced by mid '90s Guided by Voices, but
Right.
yeah. So, like you said, they wear their influences on their sleeves, but they're a good band. They're basically a tuneful noise rock band
Yeah.
until and it takes a surprising turn for me because it's noise rock up until the latter third of the record. There's that streak there with Real Power, which lurks in a really lovely way, just really good power pop. Then Play Music, which is kind of dopey but kind of fun. Basically throwback jangle pop about real bright-eyed happy shit. Dude really, really wants to play music. And then
he loves his rock and roll, basically.
Yeah, and then Be Here Now, which is a slower and softer pop tune sung by the leaders of this band are a husband and wife duo, the Schumanns, and this is sung by the wife, and it's got a neat little riff, and it ends with this neat little jaunty horn arrangement, which kind of comes out of nowhere. and is a sweet touch. And then I really like Sweet Release Ain't No Devil because it's a cheeky but cool no depression alt country send up with a funny lyric goofing on afterlife theology.
Yeah.
You know, what it does. This idea is, who's to say there's a devil, and who's to say I'm going to hell? I'm just going to enjoy the rock and roll and bliss out into my afterlife.
Yeah.
So it's just really, really good stuff. So strong record. I agree with you. It might be a candidate for my top 10 as well. This hasn't been a very good year for record for albums. Yeah, these guys have I'm assuming they're a young band. They have a future, at least as lo-fi heroes,
Yeah.
indie heroes. They
Right.
might have themselves a nice little future. So more power to Golomb. Not
Now,
not
now,
not, not that Golomb.
yeah.
It's
They spell it differently on purpose.
yes, yeah, they do. So they're really cool. So
Now,
now let's
speaking of authentic indie heroes,
Yeah, and speaking of authentic indie heroes, but also contrasting optimism with severe pessimism, let's talk about the latest record from Osees. Longtime listeners of the Curmudgeon Rock Report will know that we've talked a lot about the Osees over the years. We had an episode dedicated to them almost 3 years ago now, where we covered the proggish part of their catalog when John Dwyer, the band leader, went full weird. And we've covered a couple of the album releases since then. And so they're out with a new record, which is called Abomination Revealed at Last, which is, really dramatic title and kind of consistent with their goofiness in how they do their albums. And it portends another sci-fi odyssey, but in this case, not really. So let's start talking about this record. So Osees have spent the past several years cranking out willfully weird, willfully spastic rock that can aptly be described as space punk. They released A Foul Form, a straightforward lo-fi hardcore punk album in 2022, bursting forth with their double drum bash-outs driven by raw, heavy guitars. Last year, they abandoned guitars altogether, using a sampler to capture odd but cool fuzzy keyboard sounds on Sorks 80, which resulted in a futuristic wild romp through the blenderized mind of band leader John Dwyer. Earlier this month, the band released the grimly titled Abomination Revealed at Last. The new album finds Osees mostly splicing the hardcore of A Foul Form with the oddball space rock of Sorks 80. This results in something cool and unexpected. A quirky set of 12 songs at over 35 minutes, pulse, skitter, rocket, rumble, thrust, and in a surprising touch, groove-tastic propulse. Go groove-tastic propulsive, I suppose you can say. There's some really fun bass work on here. It's not funky, but it thumps frenetically and fun-sized in spots throughout the album. Abomination Revealed at Last also finds Dwyer in a profoundly pessimistic, angry, and paranoid mindset about the near-term dystopian future of America. He's not thrilled about the coming AI takeover of society. He's pissed that tech barons like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have so much power and control over our lives. And yeah, he's less than thrilled with the Mango Mussolini unleashing cruel authoritarianism in his country. There seems to be a somber recognition here from Dwyer that quite a few science fiction tropes are on the verge of becoming reality. Prog rock alien shit is now documentary fodder. That realization helps lift the album into more meaningful and poignant territory, albeit screamed. It screamed very aggressively, but it's poignant. Highlights here include the slinky, snaking, bass-driven Sneaker, my favorite song on the record, which oscillates back and forth between nearly Primus-like oddball stomp and hardcore fury. There's Infected Chrome, which with its weird synth effects and grandiose keyboard riffage sounds like a delicious leftover from Sorks 80. There's Glue, a pulsating, punked-out romp that again rides a hypnotic bass line. Coffin Wax, a twitchy blast of hardcore punk. And then Fight Simulator, which starts out as the strongest hardcore tune on the album and then veers into really weird, really proggy extended outros. The more I listen to this album, the more I respect it and enjoy it. Abomination Revealed at Last is the thinking man's freakout record. In a mediocre year for albums, this latest Osees outing has a chance to make my end of the year top 10. John Dwyer has a beautifully twisted mind, and we're all the better for it. Arturo, what do you say? What do you say?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think it's a really, really good, strong record. It's exactly what you say it is. It is a hybrid of the hardcore punk of 2022 is a foul form and that synthesizer, that turbocharged synthesizer space punk of 2024's Sorks 80. Yeah, he really goes on about his unhappiness with the oncoming AI revolution, but he also like really goes on about like atrocities going on around the world. Russia, Ukraine, Israel,
Yeah.
Palestine, and of course fascism rising in different parts of the world, especially his own country. And the funny thing is, you wouldn't know it by listening to the album because he's screaming 80% of the time.
Yeah. Hmm.
You need to actually read the lyrics.
Yeah. This is one of those albums that you need the songbook in front of you to really get.
I mean, he might as well be like reading from the back of a cereal box.
Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose, or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock.
If you were living anywhere in the UK in 1994, you could hear it on the various BBC radio stations. You could see it on the British version of MTV. You could read about it in the weekly music magazines of the time, such as the NME, the New Musical Express, and Melody Maker. It was the sound of a young generation of bands and artists embracing their quote-unquote Britishness by drawing on uniquely British music influences to craft a hyper-melodic, insanely catchy brand of guitar rock and pop that filled the void left by the demise of indie dance rock and shoegazer rock. It was also a defiant middle finger to the seemingly ubiquitous hegemony of American pop culture in every aspect of British pop culture, particularly in music. One got the sense that there was an ideological and aesthetic unity in these new bands and artists that sought to speak to British youth in their language, in their words, and on their terms. And most importantly of all, there was an exponentially increasing audience, if not a palpable thirst and hunger, for this fresh take on British rock. Leading the way, you had the wild magpie musical eclecticism and sophisticated songcraft of Blur. You had the Sex Pistols meet Beatles on steroids raunch of Oasis. You had the spiky, sexy punk pop of Elastica. You had the campy, melodramatic, glam-era David Bowie worship of Suede. You had Pulp's character narrative-driven update of new wave pop rock. Even artists and bands that weren't necessarily Britpop were, by both fans and critics, lumped alongside them in an adjacent manner due to them simply being part of the overall British rock revival of the decade. Radiohead had a worldwide top 40 hit the previous year with Creep and were receiving critical praise for their innovative guitar style and bombastic sound that owed a debt to such unexpected influences as REM, The Smiths, and the Pixies. You had PJ Harvey's brilliant subversion of traditional male-female sexual dynamics set to a backdrop of powerful, primal punk blues fury. You had the muscular guitar onslaught mixed with swirling psychedelia of the Verve, a band that, as the years went on, would veer closer to Britpop-esque songcraft. What truly set the Britpop movement apart from the punk and indie rock movements of years prior that spawned it was sheer ambition. For many years, bands and artists of the latter scenes were all caught up in what I call quote unquote false indie modesty, or false indie modesty. Basically oh, I don't want to sell that many records. I just want to play to a couple of hundred people in a club because otherwise it would be oh so raucous. All the while stroking their chins in the most pretentious wanker of ways. Britpop said, fuck that.
Yeah.
These bands and artists wanted a mass audience. They wanted as many people as possible to listen to their music and validate their hard work. And it's a testament to the majority of these bands and artists that they balanced their commercial ambitions with authentic artistry and a willingness to push the envelope and be cutting edge in their music, to not be complacent. It's that attempt, and often enough a successful attempt, to wed art and commerce that made the Britpop movement seem somewhat heroic. Besides, if this was all a backlash against American cultural imperialism, you don't combat that with humility and modesty. You have to bark just as loud, if not louder. You don't bring knives to a gunfight. Right. The other aspect of Britpop that set it apart from punk and indie rock of the past was the rejection of tribalism among music fans. Before, you had, oh, I don't want anyone else to listen to my favorite band. They're my band. And if anyone else likes them, it has to be a small, exclusive group of like-minded people who have the same thoughts, the same feelings, wear the same clothes, read the same books, and watch the same movies. Britpop fans said, fuck off. They wanted the whole world to enjoy what they were enjoying. It wasn't about exclusivity. It was about inclusivity of musical taste, fashion, and style, if not ethnicity, to be honest. It was that desire that gave the movement its momentum and made it so appealing to so many people. The mentality was, quote, basically, instead of shitty American pop and rock music dominating the radio, wouldn't it be better if these cool new British bands had their music dominating the airwaves instead? Wouldn't it be cool if so many people liked them? Can't we just replace the crap music with good music? It's that fresh-faced, wide-eyed perspective that made Britpop so endearing to so many music fans, especially those in continental Europe and North America who were looking for an alternative to what was being given to them. It isn't surprising that the two bands that best define these attitudes from both the artist and fan perspectives, Oasis and Blur, both came out with career-making, era-defining, all-time classic albums in 1994 that codified Britpop as a legitimate musical and pop cultural movement whose reverberations started to reach the world at large. Before we get to those two masterpieces, though, we're going to do a quick lightning round of essential Britpop and Britpop-adjacent singles from this wonderful year. But before we get into that, Chris, it's your turn to chime in on where we are with Britpop in 1994.
Yeah, what you had was a movement that, an extreme movement that you hadn't seen in British rock and roll. Probably to that degree, the how it caught on and how it swept the imaginations of their countrymen. You hadn't really seen that since punk rock. I mean, you had, in the late 70s and into new wave. So like that 77 to 80 period, that we covered in the third golden age of rock. You hadn't really seen it with this kind of intensity and sort of, nationwide thing. And again, we talked about that. One of the things is that there was a void that Britpop filled, but it wasn't just the next scene or the next thing. It became an absolute cultural phenomenon. So it wasn't shoegaze, and it wasn't the Manchester dance rock, or it wasn't any of that stuff. I mean, those were things that caught on and were cool. And kind of blew up, but they weren't Oasis, they weren't Blur, they weren't even Pulp, they weren't even Suede. So I mean, this is just something that was definitely needed, and it has parallels to grunge.
Yeah.
that, you had, this longing for meaning.
Yeah.
And, that's where grunge came in because, you were drowning in a sea of hair metal bands and, late period hair metal bands and sort of, uh, and new kids on the block and all kinds of other bullshit, heading into 1991. And along comes Nirvana and squashes that and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and the rest. And it's the same thing here that, you said, they were getting sick of the American cultural imperialism. There was this need for something cool and different and shared common shared experience where there was a longing for that among Britpop fans that like something that's our own and something that we can celebrate together and something that has a communal energy to it. And really, that's what Britpop was about. It was all about the communal energy and bringing back the sounds of the late '60s and early '70s or the vibes. Beatles, Kinks, Stones, T-Rex,
Yeah.
bands like that, Slade, and just a lot of other bands from that period, and just sort of bringing that feeling back. And so, quite a renaissance and quite a story, and you covered it really, really well. Yeah, it was kind of anti-snotty rock
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, they were defiantly commercial. They wanted to be popular, but it wasn't low common denominator shit pop. It
Nope.
was good rock and roll that had artistic validity and authenticity. It had an edge, but wed with commercial ambition, which, yes, folks, it is possible. And
Yeah.
these bands proved it. Most of them did, or the
Yeah.
best ones did.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it was something to behold that these albums back then, and we didn't live in Britain obviously in 1994 and 95. We were in college in Syracuse, New York, but you
Yeah,
imagine living it back then. That must have
yeah,
been extraordinary.
yeah.
It swept like wildfire. I mean, what's the story of Morning Glory? I think it sold like 9 million copies just in Britain
Yeah.
and like 22 million copies worldwide.
Yeah,
You know,
it was a phenomenon. Yeah.
and that's the '95 record from Oasis. But yeah, it just and even the Blur went platinum. Blur didn't sell quite as much, but they went platinum with the album that we're going to cover on this episode, Parklife.
Right.
So pretty extraordinary.
Yeah. All right, so let's go to this lightning round of awesome Britpop and Britpop adjacent singles of 1994, starting with Primal Scream with Rocks. This is most definitely Britpop adjacent. In 1991, they rose to the forefront of the British rock scene with the seminal album Screamadelica, an album that dives headfirst into EDM forms like house and techno while merging it with the seemingly disparate styles of gospel and classic 1960s hippie rock. They leaned into the latter on their 1994 album Give Out But Don't Give Up, where they went full on 1970s boogie woogie rock, as if they heard the Black Crowes and decided to be the UK version of them. The
Yep.
album itself is a hit and miss affair, but the good stuff is great, such as the lead single Rocks. It's a raunchy, sweaty, swampy, funky affair that proves the Scream were adept at traversing all sides of the rock spectrum. Chris?
Yeah, great phony Rolling Stones. Just
Yeah.
real stomp to it, real boogie to it, and just it's bottom heavy. And Bobby Gillespie sounds like he's having the time of his life on the vocals. For sure.
Yeah. Next, the Stone Roses with Love Spreads. This is closer to actual Britpop since the Roses were kind of proto Britpop. Sure, they had funky grooves that owed a lot to electronic dance music, but they also had jangly guitar riffs, soaring melodies, and tight songcraft that truly evoked 1960s British rock. When they finally emerged with a follow-up album to their classic 1989 self-titled debut, like Primal Scream, they took their rock to a more 1970s direction, as lead singer single Love Spreads has a monster guitar riff taken straight out of Led Zeppelin's songbook. The album that this track comes from, Second Coming, isn't very good and received appropriately bad reviews, but this song deserves its props. It grooves like a motherfucker and has a killer chorus. On its own, it stands up with the best Stone Roses singles. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely killer riff. It definitely Zeppelin is a good comparison. Stones, good comparison too. Just a subtly infectious blues groove to it too. And one thing that I noticed, like when the song gets going after this, almost gets going after that long musical intro, the intro, it quotes Voodoo Child.
Yeah,
very, very subtly near the beginning, and that's a really neat touch to bring it into the American psychedelic rock of the late '60s as well. So yeah, the Stone Roses were very clever in this song. They're rocking out, they're bluesing out, and they're psyching out, and they never captured this kind of magic again as a band.
No.
This was their last hurrah.
Yeah, totally. Next, Supergrass with Caught by the Fuzz. Now we get into serious Britpop, but of the turbocharged variety. This trio from Oxford blasts out of the gate with their very first single, a power pop nugget that fuses punk aggression with sugary sweet vocal harmonies and a catchy chorus. Very, very reminiscent of the Buzzcocks. It's also one of the few, if not the only, songs of the Britpop era that harkens back to that age-old rock and roll tradition of getting in trouble with the cops. Chris?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting that it's a song called Caught by the Fuzz, and it's just a catchy fuzz rock number.
Yeah.
It's total fuzz rock and just a rumbling punk energy. It's an aptly named song, and I love that surf rock harmony vocal on the bridge.
Yeah.
Really, really kind of a weird touch. Kind of comes out of nowhere because, otherwise it's a blast off of a song. But then putting that in there and having that surf rock touch, it just showed that this band had real quirks to it and was one of the more unusual and cooler outfits of second-rate Britpop there.
Next, Elastica with Line Up. Elastica are still a year away from releasing one of the very best and, in both Curmudgeons' opinions, the most underrated of the Britpop era, album of the Britpop era. On this single, Justine Frischmann and company continue to whet people's appetites at the time with a jagged riff, a pounding rhythm, and a silky smooth vocal delivery that perfectly encapsulates Frischmann's brilliance at combining detached cool, coy sultriness, and effortless sexuality. Chris?
Yeah, thumping, glorious pop nugget. And Justine Frischmann was the man. Great song to strut around in your underwear to.
Yeah. No, it's a swaggering rhythm more than a pounding rhythm and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's swaggering. It doesn't pound, but it's just real swagger, real confidence, real cocky. Just great throwback rock and roll.
Next, Pulp with Do You Remember the First Time? Pulp's biggest hit single yet, at this time, put them firmly in the front line of Britpop with a bittersweet reminiscence of teenage sexuality set to a beautifully languid slice of pop rock. No matter how indebted early Pulp was to synthpop, it was always Russell Sr.'s beautiful guitar lines that carried the song, at least in early Pulp. Chris?
Yeah, real 80s throwback shit here.
Yeah.
Totally. Real psychedelic furs kind of stuff. Lays the keyboards on thick. But you're right, the guitar lines in early Pulp are really they're almost pretty.
Yeah.
Just really pretty. And then Jarvis Cocker, when he wasn't being a total like goofball, he could sing. Yeah. And he could really emote with his voice. And so this is the kind of Pulp that I like. There's not a lot of Pulp I like, but this is the Pulp. This is the Pulp I like.
Yeah. Next, The Cranberries with two huge hit singles, Zombie and Ode to My Family. No, they weren't British, they were from Ireland. But like I said in the previous episode, their warm, jangly guitars and soaring melodies owed a huge debt to the Smiths, who are a major Britpop touchstone. Therefore, the Cranberries are most definitely Britpop adjacent. No Need to Argue was the follow-up album to their multi-platinum worldwide crossover hit record from the previous year, and it became an even bigger hit thanks to the monstrously popular hit single Zombie, one of the defining singles by any band of the 1990s. It sees the Cranberries in crunchy, grungy guitar rock mode with Dolores O'Riordan's vocals alternating between yearning and pissed off, lamenting the deaths of young children in an IRA bombing in Warrington, England a year earlier. The other massive single from this album, Ode to My Family, is more of the sweeping, gorgeous folk rock that this band were known for, with O'Riordan delivering a touching lyric about the simplicity and innocence of youth. In most other songwriters' hands, this kind of song would be trite, sentimental crap. In O'Riordan's hands, it's sublime. Chris?
Yeah, it really is sublime. This band didn't make great albums, but they sure did pump out absolutely monumental singles.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, Zombie has 1.5 billion plays on Spotify.
Good Lord.
And because it's an eternal staple on quote unquote modern rock radio, they still call it modern rock, but they play songs that are 30 years old.
Yeah.
So there's that. Dolores O'Riordan was as good at growling out a hard rock anthem as she was crooning lovely prom-worthy bubblegum. Which, Ode to My Family, I guess you could call it prom-worthy bubblegum in form, but it's more poignant than that.
Yeah.
And so, that they had that sort of loveliness with like Dreams on the first record, but then they come back with Here, and it's really surprising because it's a song like that where thinking, like, sharing memories of her mother.
Yeah.
It's just kind of weird, but Zombie's the revelation because who knew she was a born rocker chick? Good stuff. Good stuff.
Now, for as timelessly enduring and singularly brilliant as the singles and albums of Oasis are during the Britpop era, what really solidifies that band's greatness during this time is how stunning the B-sides are to those awesome singles. Noel Gallagher was on such an overwhelming hot streak as a songwriter in the 1990s that the band's B-sides were and are as good or better than most other bands' A-sides and best material. So, starting with this episode and for the rest of this series, we'll conclude the lightning rounds of Britpop singles with a review of sensational Oasis B-sides to the singles they released each year. Starting with I Will Believe, the B-side to Supersonic. From that opening chiming arpeggiated riff that fades into that crashing drum beat that brings you to that beautifully melodic lead guitar that guides the track throughout, you know you're listening to a delicious piece of rock and roll pop candy. Liam Gallagher's vocals add empathy as well as an endearing sense of resiliency to Big Brother Noel's lyrics of despair and self-loathing. Most bands, even today, would kill to have a song like this in their frontline arsenal. For Oasis, it was a throwaway. Next, Fade Away, the B-side to Cigarettes and Alcohol. As is common practice in the great tradition of rock and roll, Noel Gallagher, at least during this period of Oasis, has been known to lift riffs, melodies, and sometimes entire lyrics from previous older songs. He pilfers the verse melody from Wham's 1984 hit single Freedom for this track. Yes, George Michael's Wham. But it doesn't really matter when the song rocks with this much intensity and cathartic energy. Younger brother Liam once again adds pathos and emotional weight to Noel's lyrics of disillusionment at the lost hopes of youth. Awesome riff, awesome drive by the whole band, awesome vocal performance by Liam, and yet another outstanding Oasis song relegated to a B-side, one that most bands would pimp their mothers to have. Next, Whatever, a standalone single. This actually isn't a B-side, but is instead a standalone single released in time for the Christmas season of 1994. With its full orchestral arrangement, here's the track where Oasis finally and fully unveil not just their Beatles influence, but also their ambition to match the Beatles and become the 1990s version of the Fab Four. This song was a huge hit in the UK, going as high as number 3 and charted in the top 10 throughout various European countries, helping pave the way for the huge international success of the next Oasis album. Once again, Noel Gallagher stole a verse melody, this time from Neil Innes's 1973 song, How Sweet to Be an Idiot. Innes sued and received a songwriter credit as well as a share of the publishing royalties. But so what? This is a much better song. And next and finally, Half the World Away, the B-side to Whatever. Noel Gallagher indulges in another case of borrowing, quote unquote, this time from the 1968 Herb Alpert song, This Guy's in Love with You, written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David. But instead of lifting the verse melody, he adapts the basic chord progression as well as the electric piano riff that serves as the outro for the older song. Again, it doesn't matter, as Noel makes it all his own, and in doing so makes it another Oasis classic. Its wistful pining for a life outside a boring city puts it in line with several of the same lyrical sentiments from the Definitely Maybe album, so it makes you wonder if this song came from those sessions. Sung by Noel, it's one of his most moving acoustic ballads, which is saying something because the Oasis canon has a whole load of amazing acoustic ballads. All right, Chris, that's a whole lot of Oasis B-sides.
Yeah, it really is. And here's my question. How do you keep any of these songs off the album? I guess we have to appreciate that this was 93, 94, and this is like just before the World Wide Web hit and changed everything. And so you're talking about sort of pre-internet thinking about how you distribute your music. Yeah. And so there was this ethos still of reserving songs that you know are really good and album worthy, but keeping them for standalone singles or for B-sides, or giving something to the fans and having things stand apart from the record. But it's kind of stunning because like Whatever is just an amazing song.
Yeah,
amazingly sung by Liam, amazingly written by Noel. Just amazingly well played by the band. It has the strings. It has the drum. It's the most Lennon-esque song they ever did. Yeah. Even more so than "Don't Look Back in Anger" from What's the Story of Morning Glory. And and it's worth mentioning, by the way, that all 4 of these songs are on the deluxe remastered version of the album that we're going to cover in the next segment. Definitely Maybe. So they're all readily available. And they're all packaged in along with the original album. So they were on a roll. Like Noel Gallagher is a songwriter between 94 and 93, 94, 95. That dude could do no wrong. Yeah, I mean that guy was just a fucking just titanic talent in what he pumped out, and the prolificness of it, and the volume. And just, they all worked. And 3 of these songs or 2 of these songs are loud as fuck. Yeah. And like Fade Away might be louder than anything on the actual record. Yeah. And it's certainly faster than anything on the record. So, yeah, just really powerful stuff. And they just knew how to use that B-side, to leverage that B-side to their advantage. They were just masters at that.
On this episode, we broke down 1994, the year Britpop exploded in popularity. For the next episode, we're moving on to the year that the Britpop movement went supernova and captured the world's attention. 1995. You had seminal and essential albums and singles by the likes of Elastica, Pulp, Supergrass, and Garbage. You also had timeless classic albums by Britpop-adjacent artists like Radiohead and PJ Harvey. And of course, you had the ridiculous but highly entertaining feud between Oasis and Blur that set the stage for two era-defining albums, one of which went on to become one of the greatest albums of all time. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you a Britpop Timeline Part 3, 1995. So, talking about the year of Britpop of 1994, there's quite a bit of good music, but really it comes down to two titanic, game-changing, landscape-altering albums. Blur's Parklife, the album that made them superstars, and Oasis, Definitely Maybe, their first album that also made them superstars. Let's start with Blur, okay? With their album from the previous year, Modern Life is Rubbish, Blur not only managed to rein in all their diverse influences into one artistic vision, they also managed to put themselves in the forefront of a new musical movement in British pop culture that has skewed American musical dominance and lashed out against American cultural imperialism in general. It was now time for Blur to take the next step and bring this new musical ideology to a whole new level of commercial acceptance. For more selfish reasons, the time was right for them to stake their claim as Britain's best band. It was all about Englishness. Blur weren't the only British band in the 1992 to 93 timeframe that were delving into purely English musical influences to give a new, modern twist and sound to the British pop tradition. However, they were by far and away the most versatile in how they touched on so many different subgenres: anthemic Kingsian music hall, the angular offbeat song structures and manic energy of XTC, the effervescent power pop of the Buzzcocks, a little ska punk here, a little Manchester-flavored indie dance rock there, a few doses of shoegazer-esque psychedelia there. What held it all together were a couple of things. First, it was lead singer Damon Albarn's incredibly mature and sophisticated songwriting, which drew on the melodic and structural traditions of the past while lyrically exploring the depth underneath the supposed mundanity of English life. Much like his clear hero Ray Davies, Albarn's character-driven narratives dominated the lyrics of this period of Blur's music. On one hand, like Davies in his classic work with the Kinks, Albarn wistfully longed for the loss of English identity and culture in the light of aggressive gentrification and American cultural dominance. On the other hand, and unlike Davies, he was quite vicious in his attacks on British people who all too readily rolled over and accepted this Americanization of their culture in both media consumption, music, film, TV, video gaming, etc., and in their shallow, relentless, capitalistic greed. The other aspect of Blur that not only held their sound together, but also made them such a distinct band was the guitar work of Graham Coxon. The band's secret weapon, it was Coxon who made the band a truly modern, well, modern for the time, 1990s pop group with his wide palette of punky riffs, trippy textures, and noisy solos, all owing a significant debt to, ironically enough, American alternative bands like Sonic Youth, the Pixies, and Pavement. This element in Blur's sound would be brought out to the forefront in a few short years, but for now, it colored the band's Britpop sound and era and period. When they went into the studio with Smith's producer Stephen Street to record what would become the album Parklife, the goal was to put an irresistible radio-friendly shine to the tightest, catchiest, most powerful songs the band had written to this point. That mission was accomplished and then some, with a critically adored commercial blockbuster of a record that catapulted Blur to the stratosphere of British pop music and made them instant stars abroad. Opening track and lead single Girls and Boys became an instant era-defining classic by venturing into bouncy Pet Shop Boys-esque synth-pop, with Albarn's lyrics wryly commenting on the shameless decadence of upper-middle-class English youth vacationing in Greece. The bolshy, stomping glam rock sing-along of the title track finds Auburn purveying the daily lives of working class people hanging out in parks with what some interpret as affection and with what others interpret as sarcasm. It's up to the listener, I guess. But there's more, so much more to this album of perfect pop rock bliss. The lovely Baroque pop of Clover Over Dover, the sleek new wave pop of Trouble in the Message Center, the spiky, jagged guitar pop of Tracy Jacks and London Loves, the pop punk adrenaline rush of Bank Holiday and Jubilee, the exquisite hybrid of chamber pop and jangly folk rock shown in End of a Century and Badhead, the doomed romance of the epic ballad To the End, the wicked demonic circus music and excoriating lyrics of Magic America. You can guess what that song's about. It's just a marathon of perfect pop songs done in a seemingly endless, dizzying array of styles, genres, and subgenres. The breadth of Blur's stylistic ambition, the depth and importance of their lyrical message, and the virtuoso songcraft, all packed into one multicolored and multi-textured package, makes Parklife one of the most stunning accomplishments any band has made in rock history. Chris?
Yeah, for what it's worth, number 438 on the Rolling Stone list of 500 greatest albums ever made.
Should be higher.
Yeah, but they have it at 438. So, yeah, you really hit the nail on the head with this album. It's a stunningly diverse pop record. It's like this perfect pop record, but so diverse in terms of the styles and the tones, and just it's cheeky, satiric, and glib on the one end, and lovely, introspective, and poignant on the other. Like To the End is just a really sweet song. And then like This Is a Lull, which is about British sea radio, that keeping tracking the motions of the seas on the radio, so that kind of counts as Kinksian nostalgia for let's make things as British as possible. But then you get into the satire. Like I think Parklife is satire. I think it's goofing on those folks that you always see. What are those people doing in the park on a Tuesday at 3:30? Kind of energy, and just a lot of just really strong stuff. I love Girls and Boys. That's a funny song, and would really cool beat that the fact that they could actually pull off an electropop song like that. With that kind of synth action going, and then also, you have that, and you put that together on the with Graham Coxon's riffage on Parklife, which is just awesome. I mean, that guy could play his ass off. So yeah, this is one of the better records of the 90s. Certainly one of the best British records of the 90s. It's not like the next record, which I'm going to put on the top 10 of all rock records released in the 1990s. But this is some pretty extraordinary stuff. Damon Albarn and Graham Coxon were singular talents, and this is where they peaked, for sure.
All right, now they're on tour right now, playing a bunch of songs from this record. Stadiums full of middle-aged hipsters and young people in their 20s are singing along to Oasis. And this is the album that started the legend.
Speaks to the timelessness of pure fucking rock and roll. So let's talk about Oasis's Definitely Maybe. Oasis's 1994 masterwork Definitely Maybe is a blast of a record in numerous senses of that word. Blast. The album blasts listeners with relentless energy and noise and sweat, shake, and swagger. Also puts the guitars on full blast. This is a proudly loud, blasting affair as Noel Gallagher pummels us by turning his amps up seemingly all the way, and the producers and mixing engineers putting those guitars squarely at the top of the mix with only a few overdubs included. And of course, these working class louts from Manchester, England clearly have a blast performing these cocky but optimistic tunes and bringing their musical ideas and sensibilities to bear. By 1994, Britain was hungry for a new sound and a new rock and roll hero. Turns out that this was it, and gloriously so it was. The stars of Oasis's debut album, of course, are brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher. Liam, the lead singer, belts these tunes out with a unique bravado and recordings that benefit from a lack of studio soundproofing, making them sound like they're emanating from a huge empty cathedral. Noel, guitarist and chief songwriter, is just a killer here, serving up compelling gnarly riff and solo after compelling gnarly riff and solo, and immediately demonstrating his extreme gift for crafting pop hooks and instantly accessible melodies. He was obviously influenced by the Beatles, T-Rex, Slade, The Who, and other British bands of the late 60s and early 1970s. Those artists informed his expansive and impressive mastery of the pure rock and roll idiom. Now, here's something I did not know before I started researching this for this episode. Neither Gallagher brother is a founding member of the band that became Oasis. Those honors fall to guitarist Paul Bonehead Arthurs, bassist Paul Giggsy McGuigan, and drummer Tony McCarroll, who, along with a singer named Chris Hutton, formed what was originally known as Rain in Manchester in 1990. After only a few months, Hutton fell out of favor with his bandmate, who now needed a replacement. Enter Liam Gallagher, who subsequently played shows around Manchester with the band now known as Oasis. Liam's brother Noel, a roadie for this local band called Inspiral Carpets, liked what he heard enough that he asked to join the band. Oasis then invited Noel to join. Noel, to their good fortune, came armed with an already robust catalog of songs he'd written, something that led rather quickly to Noel assuming creative leadership of the band. After nearly 2 years of playing around the UK and recording demos, the band was discovered by Creation Records head Alan McGee during a performance in Glasgow, Scotland. Eventually, Oasis signed with both Creation and the much bigger Sony Records, putting itself in position for worldwide coverage and distribution pretty damn quickly. Oasis recorded Definitely Maybe twice. It found itself dissatisfied with the first effort and feeling the pressure to deliver something good. They fired their producer and started over. Production the second go-around was handled by Noel Gallagher and co-producer Mark Coyle. Wanting to replicate their live sound as closely as they could, Coyle and Gallagher decided to do away with the soundproofing from the studio and record the basic tracks live. Originally, Gallagher overdubbed the hell out of the guitars following the live basics, but a mixing engineer named Owen Morris came in after recording and stripped the final mix to minimal overdubs and cranked up Noel's raw, bombastic guitar noise into the lead position, so to speak. The result was a huge-sounding thunderthuck of a debut, one of the best in rock and roll history. The album leads with rollicking celebratory romp Rock and Roll Star. The cockier-than-thou Liam Gallagher sounded wholly convincing when he sang, "I live my life for the stars that shine. People say it's just a waste of time. Then they say I should feed my head. That to me was just a day in bed. I'll take my car and drive real far. They're not concerned about the way we are. In my mind, my dreams are real. Now you concerned about the way I feel. Tonight I'm a rock and roll star." The song burns with a dreamy intensity and befitting of that lyric. Shaker Maker, one of 4 singles the band released from this album, follows, and it flashes the sheer audacity that made Oasis so much fun at times. The song literally cribs the wonderfully 1970s Coca-Cola jingle, "I'd like to teach the world to sing," for the melody on the verses, a move that got the band sued by that song's authors. The inclusion wound up costing them some bucks in a settlement, but ultimately, big effing deal. Shaker Maker rocks balls and carves out its own space in the canon of bombastic rock nuggets. Definitely Maybe's other 3 singles are even better. Live Forever is a melodic tour de force that juxtaposes the power of Noel's guitars and McCarroll's drumming with the lovely sincere crooning from Liam and with the beautiful melody served up by Noel. Supersonic is a simple but powerful rocker with a soaring, swaggering anthemic chorus. Some of the song's ridiculous lyrics, quote, "I know a girl called Elsa. She's into Alka-Seltzer. She sniffs it through a cane on a supersonic train," grow funnier with repeated listens. giving the song an oddball poignancy and warmth. Cigarettes and Alcohol is an absurdly great rock and roll song, perhaps one of the best songs of the 90s. Here, Noel channels Mark Bolan of T-Rex with a riff that draws close to T-Rex Bang-A-Gong, Get It On. It's flattery for sure, but Cigarettes and Alcohol is anything but derivative. Thank Liam Gallagher for that. His astounding vocal performance lends layers of mischief and slyness to the celebration of these beloved vices. He kills on this song and knocks another brilliant Noel melody out of the park. And it's worth mentioning, by the way, that this song was so cheeky and so fun about singing about these vices that it was covered by Rod Stewart years later. Yeah, which is perfect. It's a perfect marriage of song and singer. The album ends with the tremendous 1-2 punch of Slide Away and Married with Children. Slide Away mixes aggressive riffage and tight verse-chorus-verse structure with the album's sweetest, most innocent lyrics. The chorus is precious but seemingly sincere. Quote, "Now that your mind will find a way of chasing the sun, let me be the one who shines with you in the morning. We don't know what to do. Two of a kind will find a way to do what we've done. Let me be the one who shines with you and we can slide away." Definitely maybe closes with its one acoustic volley, Married with Children, a lovely ballad about the give and take of domestic semi-bliss with enough intense energy and sentiment to make up for its lack of electric fury. Here, for one final instance, Noel shows off his unique brand of songwriting genius. Definitely maybe is a special album and stands as one of the most intense yet joyous records imaginable. I personally think it's one of the 10 best rock records of the 90s, better than the record that came after it. I'm in the minority in thinking that, but I really do believe that. And by the way, this album ranks number 217 on Rolling Stone's 2020 list of the 500 greatest albums ever made, which is about right. So what do you say, Art?
Yeah, I might actually put a little tad higher, actually. But yeah, here's the thing of the way how it was recorded. The first time they did it, right, it was with David Batchelor, and it was a really thin mix.
Yeah,
it wasn't bombastic enough. Then Noel got together with Mark Coyle, and they did it together. Okay, but it was still unsatisfactory. Creation Records didn't like it at all. They said it was a little it's just like too many guitar solos, too much this, too much that. So then when they brought in Owen Morris, and he's the one on the third shot, they almost released the one that Noel Gallagher did with Mark Coyle. It was Creation that said, no, we got to get this perfect. They brought in Owen Morris. He perfected it, and that's the version that we all know and love. And Morris would go on to produce the next Oasis album too.
Yeah, it's not necessarily lean and mean, but it's not as maximal.
Right, exactly. And the thing about this album is that when it came out, there was nothing like it at the time. Britpop, which was like already becoming a big thing, was defined by Blur, by Suede, by Pulp. Okay, and all those bands have their great things to them. They don't rock like Oasis.
Nope, not even close.
So when this album came out, like, holy shit, fucking rock and roll. And it kind of like Blur was still really big, and Elastica would come out the next year with their kick-ass punk rock album. But it was the album that basically pushed Suede away.
Yeah.
It put Suede on the shelf.
Yeah, they killed Suede dead.
They killed Suede dead, and Pulp didn't get killed dead because they would come out with an amazing pop single the next year. So they got saved by that. But like Britpop had to get a little heavier after Oasis. You know, bands had to start cranking out the guitars.
Yeah, they definitely raised the stakes.
You know, and it definitely raised the bar for British rock in general. And in my opinion, they would raise the bar even higher with the next album. But for this record, this was the sound of young Britain, or young white Britain, in 1994 for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I still maintain that it's a better record because it's unrelentingly loud and unrelentingly brash. And it just has a unity of purpose and unity of sound and unity of songcraft that, yes, the next record's more diverse in that sense, but I think that just the unity of this record and how like seamless it is and how just it captures a zeitgeist and it sticks to it. It doesn't relent, and so that's what I love about it.
Yeah. So it's an all-time classic. It's worth revisiting. It's an album that should be listened to from top to bottom. It's an album, and just like Blur's Parklife, it's an album. You got to listen to it in its entirety to really get it.
Yep,
absolutely.
All right.
So we've reached the end of 1994. 1995 is going to be the next episode, and it's going to be a doozy of a long one. There's a lot of shit that came out that year.
Yeah, absolutely. 95 was the peak. Yeah. That was the peak year for Britpop, and so we're going to have a lot of ground to cover. And so definitely tune in for us on that one. We'll have we'll be at our best, and we'll be at our most expansive. So definitely carve out 2 hours of time in your schedule when you're on the treadmill or you're commuting to work or whatever. Make us your number one. So please do that. And as part of that, we love your affinity, folks. And as always, at the end of these episodes, we encourage you to join our Facebook's Curmudgeonly community up there on Facebook, where we promote this podcast, and we promote what we're doing, and we share a lot of cool stuff on there. Arturo puts up a lot of cool videos from YouTube on there to share and to engage folks. And we have our frequent flyers. And so hello everybody, keep on rocking in the free world, which it ain't quite as free as it used to be, but keep hanging in there. You can join it's invite only, but we'll let you in. Facebook.com/group/curmudgeonrock. Want to send us fan mail? Do you think that Parklife sucks? We'd really love to hear from you on that, because we'd love to hear a counter argument. So hit us up at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And as always, we'll have a special Spotify playlist, which basically comprises of the 10 singles we talked about and the 2 albums in their entirety. That'll be the playlist. It's all ready to go, and you'll be able to access that playlist via a link in our episode description, and you can find that wherever you access your podcasts, whether it's Apple or Stitcher or Amazon or wherever else. So please look out for that and enjoy that as the soundtrack to this episode. Dig it.